Hello everyone and welcome to NAPCAN's slightly belated Children's Week webinar called Let's Raise Our Voices. My name is Helen Fogarty and I'm NAPCAN's Communications Manager. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Turrbal and Yagara First Nations people who are the traditional custodians of the land where I am today in Brisbane. I'd like to particularly welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are online today, and please everyone feel free to share in the chat where you're logging on from today. Because we're talking about children's voices, I'd also like to acknowledge the important work of SNAICC, that's SNAICC, as the national voice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. If you don't know about them and their work, look them up. They do some really great stuff elevating the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. And just to further pay my respects, I'd like to read a short poem that's been written from the perspective of children. It comes from a children's rights book that's just been launched during Children's Week by Children's Rights Queensland. I'll mention it a little bit more later, but I just wanted to read this as a way of sort of setting the scene. We stand on the lands, we look at the skies, we swim in the waters, my friends and I. We play together on traditional lands, we walk with First Nations people hand in hand. From our hearts, we say thank you for letting us share the countries that you love. We will also take care. So I thought that was a lovely, gentle way to start, and it really does remind us why we're here today. But before we get into the webinar proper, I'll just quickly do a bit of housekeeping. The audience are all in listen only mode, so you don't have to worry too much about at all about cameras or audio. But you should still be able to see some of the other Zoom functions at the bottom of your screen. So if you'd like to use the chat or the Q&A function, feel free. We've got lots of content from our speakers today, so we'll be sharing things in the chat. The webinar will be recorded. We usually ask that question, and we'll be sending it out to anyone who's registered, along with links to the things mentioned today. We like to send our webinars out with a bit of a resource sheet. So, as most of you will know, last week was Children's Week. Children's Week is an annual event that celebrates the rights of children. And this year and last year, the theme was based on Article 15 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. That right is all about children being able to meet with other children and young people and to join groups and organisations. So our aim for today was to celebrate this right with some fantastic examples of projects that are happening around Australia. We're really lucky with the projects that we've been able to get along today, because we have a nice range from national to local, and some really great speakers. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about these projects. The three case studies, I'll introduce them as they're going to speak, but just as a brief summary, the first is the Youth Voice in Parliament project, which is a national project run largely by volunteers. The second one is Youth Voice Northern Territory, which is a territory-wide project coordinated by NTCOSS. And the third is a local area project that's engaging younger children, so primary age school children from the Ipswich, Western Brisbane area. Because today's about sharing examples and ideas, feel free to put in the chat if you know of other projects that are of interest, and also if you know of projects or resources that might help all of us to raise the voices of children and young people. I know there's a lot of really great work going on, and we could certainly run a heap of these webinars showcasing these things. So we hope that this will be a nice kind of taster and a bit of inspiration for us all. And as I said, I don't know a lot about these projects, so I'm also really interested to learn more. So without any further ado, I'll ask Ashleigh to turn on her camera and audio. Ashleigh Streeter-Jones is the founder and facilitator of Raise Our Voice. I'm not usually a fan of long introductions, but I have to mention a few things about Ashleigh. She has a very impressive resume. She's been ACT Woman of the Year. She's been a Forbes 30 Under 30 listee. She's been recognised by the Foundation of Young Australians as a young social pioneer. She's been recognised by Australian Financial Review as a top 100 women of influence. And she was selected as one of 50 young global leaders to attend Davos at the World Economic Forum, plus much, much more. I also want to highlight that the work Ashleigh's talking about today is work that she's doing as a volunteer. So she also has a full-time job. So that's pretty impressive. Thank you, Ashleigh, for making time to speak with us today. Over to you.
It is my pleasure, and thank you for the introduction. I'm going to start screen sharing. So I'd like to begin by also acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I live, work and play. For myself, this was the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people until fairly recently, and I am on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. So thank you for having me with you today. A little bit of background about how this work came to be. So I actually started my career in activism and advocacy working with World Vision's youth movement VGen. And my work was entirely focused on supporting young people on that premise of young people don't have a lot of money, but we do have time. So let's talk about how we can use our time to create change. So for 5 years, I worked with young people aged 15 to 25 to encourage them to know the value of their voice and give them the tools to speak up on how to make change about issues of international injustice and poverty. I then moved to the ACT and focused on some work getting more young women into Parliament. So ran an initiative called the Girls Take Over Parliament program. It was during this time that I started working for the public service and became really interested in this question of young policymakers and diversity in policy. Because by and large, young voices are still quite absent from our policy making processes. And finally, throughout all this work, consistently speaking to young people about the things that they care about, how they feel about making change, and what some of their hopes and aspirations are for the future. So again, my background is in the gender space, so a lot of these conversations were happening with young women. But by and large, there were some key themes that were coming through conversations. The first, young people, particularly young women, are passionate and engaged. Young women and young people don't feel that their voices are reflected in our public decision-making systems. So when I say public decision-making systems, I'm referring by and large to government at all levels and politics at all levels as well. There's also some pretty strong research on young women in particular, and that they don't see themselves as leaders. Again, I think this is quite an interesting concept because we're seeing particularly young women, but young people leading some really incredible change at the moment. Young people are on the forefront of our climate movement. Young women in particular have been doing some incredible work around consent education. So we know that young people are leading, but when they step into these more formalized spaces that are by and large quite hierarchical, their leadership isn't recognized in the same way. And this impacts the way that they see themselves and their own leadership journeys. And then finally, young women don't feel confident that they can influence our public decision-making. So combining my past in campaigns and working in doing political campaigning, and then in the public service, I had an idea. And Raise Our Voice Australia, like all good things, just started from an idea. This is our current mission statement, and I will maintain that it remains a work in progress. But our mission is to ensure that our public decision-making institutions reflect us as a population. We are running training, providing mentoring, and creating seats at the table to increase the number of young, diverse, female and non-binary voices leading the conversation in politics, domestic policy and foreign policy. This started off as an 8-week training program, which mainly worked with 17 to 30-year-olds and was available to young women and non-binary people from across the country, and focused on increasing public service literature. So focused on the 3 pillars of domestic policy, foreign policy and politics. But earlier this year, a friend of mine came to me, as always, with a great idea. And my friend Ruby was the one that actually pitched the concept for the Raise Our Voice in Parliament campaign. She'd previously run the initiative in her own electorate, which at the time was Parramatta down in Sydney, but was interested again in this question of young people and political involvement, and was keen to see if we could scale this initiative and take it national. So this initiative ran from mid-September to, early August. I mean, the date should be etched in my brain, the 2nd of August to the 21st of September. Our ask when we went out to politicians was that they give up one of their 90-second speaking slots to read a speech written by a young person from their electorate. Being the first year we ran this, we initially went out just to MPs, so our members of parliament, but partway through the campaign period actually extended that to senators as well, not only because there was so much interest from the young people, but also that there was interest at a political level in our members of parliament wanting to amplify the voices of young Australians. I want to take you through some of the data that we collected through this process. I think it's interesting to see how young people rate, again, their own knowledge and their own confidence when engaging with the political system. So I've got some snapshots of data here that I'll take you through. So we had 603 speeches submitted when the campaign period closed, but when we went through and took out the things that were, expressing some unkind thoughts about some of our politicians, or perhaps had left the form blank, we had 569 submissions, which I think is incredibly impressive for a campaign that doesn't quite have name or brand recognition yet. But it's also a huge testament to the strength with which young people want their voices to be heard. I should also add that our speech prompt was, what is your vision for Australia in 20 years' time? So the intent was to try and get away from the politics of the day and really encourage young people to think about the futures they want to be part of and the futures that they'd like to create. As you can see, the majority of our speech submissions were from that 15 to 17 age group, but we got speech submissions from people as young as 6 years of age, and we did cap this at 21 years. Victoria and New South Wales were straight out with the most submissions, but great to see all the states and territories were represented. We also saw fairly high submissions from culturally, ethnically and linguistically diverse persons, as well as people from the LGBTQIA+ community, people who live with a disability, and First Nations Australians as well. While we had a range of genders represented, again, by and large, it was young women who were making their submissions to the campaign. When speeches were submitted, we asked the young people a series of questions, partially because we want to learn more about how young people feel about politics and how they see their own agency, but also so we can inform the conversations that we have about young people's participation. I was incredibly impressed that 60% of people who submitted speeches reported it was the first time they'd engaged with the Australian political system. As somebody who's incredibly passionate about politics and about young voices in politics, I like to think that's because the campaign had a fairly low barrier to entry. But that being said, we've also got many more ideas about how we can make it more accessible in years to come. Unsurprisingly, 83% of under 10s reported it was the first time that engaged with the Australian political system. But I think more impressive than that is the 17% who had already engaged at this point. Lowest engagement was 18 to 19-year-olds, which is interesting because that number jumps up again when you get to that 20 or 21 age group. So a lot of first-time political pundits in this cohort. A summary of the rest of the data we collected. These scores are okay, but they're not great. A 6.14 understanding of Australian politics on an average out of 10, 6.6 in confidence in engaging with Australia's political system. I will note that we didn't provide any prompting notes about what form engagement takes. We left that up to the submitter to interpret that question. 5.27 in how you rate your ability to influence Australian federal politics, and only 3.36 in how submitters rated young people are represented in our politics, which is an incredibly low score, but not a very surprising one when there's only 1 maybe 2 politicians aged under 30 in our federal parliament. So when we disaggregate this by age, not surprisingly, the lowest understanding of our political system was reported in under 10s. But I think it's also worth noting that the peak score was only 6.64. This tells us that we've got a really long way to go in making sure that we are having conversations with young people about how our political system works. Confidence in engaging was relatively high across the board, which was great to see. Again, we didn't specify what engagement looked like, but I'm very pleased to see that this is the highest group of scores. So it shows that young people are paying attention and they are ready to engage and they feel fairly capable in doing that engagement. Ability to influence, not surprising, it was very low in our under 10s, but also interesting to look again at that age group of 18 to 19-year-olds. So again, the age group that reports the most people engaging with politics actually feels the least able to create influence in that space. And again, the highest score here, 12 to 14-year-olds, was only a 5.72. So this is not a great score. And young people feeling represented, again, this is not surprising at all. But by and large, young people do not feel represented in our Australian federal politics. But interesting to note again that the highest score there is 10 to 11-year-olds. Quite interesting for us as a team was to reflect on the issues that submitters were most passionate about. So we asked submitters to tell us in 3 words or less the issues that they feel most strongly about. And again, quite unsurprisingly, climate change comes through as the predominant issue here, with equality, rights, environment and education, gender equality, all popping up in this word cloud. But there's an incredibly diverse range of issues here, from foreign disability, future, warming, discrimination, animals. Again, it reflects the diverse issues that young people care about. And it shows that young people really are sitting up and paying attention. What I'd like to do now is share a compilation video that we put together. So all of the speeches read out by politicians are available on our YouTube channel. I'd be very happy to share that link. We had approximately 70 speeches read out over the week. So we tried to have all the speeches read out in the same week, but didn't limit it to this week because we shouldn't really put a limitation on the times when young voices should be heard in our political spaces. What we did do after the first day, though, is create a compilation video of some of the speeches that were read out on that day. So I might throw now to Ali to share that video with us.
We must do better. We need to reach net zero emissions yesterday.
Getting rid of plastic straws is not enough. We need to eliminate plastic cups, plastic bags and all single-use plastics.
Our actions to prevent climate change have been limited.
With Australia ranking last in climate change action among the UN members, I'm scared.
I am scared because we are in a slow-motion car crash and the brakes are perfectly functional, but we all seem to be asleep at the wheel.
And it scares me about what the future holds if the current system is left to neglect.
This narrative must be challenged now so that in 20 years things change.
This is about the future of my country.
We are grieving a future that you are dismantling before our eyes.
I want to see active, wide-scale efforts to clean up our planet.
It's heartbreaking watching good, hard-working Australians face the impacts that are a result of profit over people.
The current mental health care system needs a dire overhaul.
Everyone is all for mental health advocacy until it means having to pay for more services.
We need ambitious policies that give us hope.
I want people who look like me to make decisions about me.
I dare to dream of a nation united despite our different faces and races.
Accountable for its tainted past, undervaluing of diversity and abuses of power.
I would like to see more diverse representation in the Australian government and media.
We girls deserve equality.
Australia risks never achieving anything close to gender equality.
I dare to see the gap closed.
I would like to be treated like a person, not a person with disabilities.
Australia needs to develop a national housing strategy.
All we ask for is clear, specific and honest education when it comes to consent and sexual health.
We are angry. We are sick and tired of empty gestures and reckless policy.
To secure the future, we have to start now.
I am 16 years old. I don't have all the answers, but you have all the power to make change. What side of history will you stand on?
Thank you. I give.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps every time. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what a great way, I think, to end on the voices of young people. Just a quick note on where to from here. We've been running a workshop series in partnership with a number of organisations also focused on youth engagement to, again, try and make these concepts of policy and how to make change and politics as accessible as possible. We also plan to run a survey which will go out to all of the young submitters to further seek their views on what next steps look like for them. What are the barriers that they identify? What does making good change look like? And we want to make sure that we're really taking these views on board as we consider the next steps for the campaign. We will absolutely be running it again in 2022. And hope to run it with more of a co-design model next year to make sure that, again, we are really incorporating and centering these young leaders. On that note, though, I might hand it over. Thank you so much, and I will be around for questions at the end if anybody is curious to learn more. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Ashleigh. That was amazing. I think seeing those speeches actually being read in Parliament is so powerful, and it's nice, like you say, you still get goosebumps, and you've probably watched it a lot of times. It was also really great to see those figures. So, and great to hear that you're running it again next year. I'm sure there's lots of people online who will be really excited to help you share the project. And I noticed that Queensland and Northern Territory were not super high, and we have quite a few people from those areas. So I think that'll be really nice to be able to help you share that and kind of follow it along. So thank you so much. I'll let you have a little break. And now I'll ask Aisha to turn on her camera and audio. Aysha Kerr is the project officer for Youth Voice Northern Territory. She's with NTCOSS, which is the Northern Territory Council of Social Services. As many of you know, there's a COSS in every state and territory, as well as ACOSS, the Australian body. They all do incredible work, and they're great supporters of children's voices. We heard about Youth Voice NT a little while back, probably when it was first starting off, and we thought it sounded really amazing. I think we shared it on some social media. So when we were planning this webinar, we thought it'd be such a great opportunity to hear how the project's going and find out what they're up to. And Aisha was kind enough to agree at quite short notice. So I'm really, really keen to hear a little bit more about what you're doing up there, Aisha. And I know you've got some COVID things happening in Northern Territory as well. So it's a big day.
Thank you, Helen. So my presentation is true territory style. It's a bit more informal, and I'm just going to chat to you all about my project. So as Helen said, my name's Aisha. I am the Youth Voice NT Project Officer at Northern Territory Council of Social Service. Youth Voice NT is a project that focuses on elevating the voices of young people here in the Territory, and in particular, young people who are experiencing marginalisation and disadvantage, and supporting them to have their say in government decision making. So the NT is actually the only jurisdiction in Australia that doesn't have a youth peak body. And in other jurisdictions, those youth peak bodies or youth affairs councils, they coordinate policy and advocacy work for young people in the youth sector. So we applied for this funding to establish a youth peak role that could work with young people in the youth sector here in the Territory and better support them or identify ways in where their voice can be shared at both the NT and national level. So in doing so, we established a Youth Voice Steering Committee, which was made up of young people and youth sector representatives from across the Northern Territory. And we tried to make sure that that was representative of different groups of young people from diverse backgrounds, as well as different regions in the Northern Territory. So it includes remote young people and remote youth workers. And when setting up the project, we spoke to them and other young people and youth services in the community about their experiences in living and working in a jurisdiction where we don't have a youth peak coordinating that work. And some of the feedback we received from them was that often when young people are consulted here in the Territory, it's for short-term outcomes focused projects. And often what this means is that young people are being asked the same questions or consulted on the same topics, but then there's groups of young people who aren't having the opportunity to have their say, and it's not being coordinated in any way. So sometimes this can result in some groups of young people experiencing consultation fatigue, particularly when young people are providing their feedback and they're providing solutions, but government or other people in community aren't listening to those solutions. So we made sure, well, I guess in working out how we wanted to deliver this project, we wanted to make sure that we really respected that feedback and that given we were a short-term 12-month funded project, that we weren't coming in and running consultations for the sake of running consultations, and really making sure that we were value adding to the work that was already going on. So what we spoke about with the steering committee and eventually decided on doing was pulling together previous consultations with young people across the Territory over the last 5 years and preparing a report that provides the collective voices of young people about solutions they've been providing for some time now. So we're just putting the final touches on that report, and it essentially provides the voices of young people and policy recommendations under 6 priority areas of the National Youth Policy Framework, which if you haven't seen, if you just Google it online, it'll come up. It was released earlier this year. And essentially those areas are youth empowerment and engagement, opportunity and security, respect, inclusion, acceptance and safety, health and well-being, navigating the system and the environment. So a lot of the issues that Ashleigh spoke about as well. And I guess in preparing this report and doing some analysis of what young people have said over the last couple of years, what we realized is that in addition to what young people have already said, a big priority for young people and the youth sector here in the Northern Territory is changing the narrative about the way young people are spoken about, particularly in the media, on social media, and by certain members of the community. So, you know, I'm sure that many people on this call may have seen young people portrayed negatively in the media in Alice Springs or other areas of the Territory in relation to youth crime. And what we know is that this is not actually an accurate reflection of young people in the Territory, and it doesn't accurately depict the strong contributions that they make to our communities. So what we really want to do is start changing the messaging about young people and promoting their strong achievements and talents, but also the very real experiences that young people go through. And really that is about starting to build that collective understanding of the way that young people contribute to society, but also the way in which decision-making impacts on us as young people and as on our futures. So in order for young people to be able to share their stories, we worked with our steering committee to build develop some accessible resources. And that was grounded on feedback that a lot of young people here in the Territory live remote. They are First Nations young people. They're young people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, young people with disability, and often when governments or non-government organisations are running consultations, the kind of default is to prepare an online survey. And with many young people here who speak English as a second, third or fourth language, this means it's often hard for them to engage and share their voices. So we wanted to make sure that we were developing resources that were culturally appropriate and written in really plain English or in language, so that these young people could participate. I think that's probably been one of the big lessons learned from this project, is that you know, really for young people to be able to meaningfully engage in decision making, we do need to engage with young people in different ways. And how we did that was working directly with youth workers and trusted adults or trusted youth service providers who have those really strong relationships with young people here in the Territory. And in the case of remote communities, can speak to young people in language and help them to understand or, you know, workshop, I guess, the questions that they're being asked. So we're finalising the report. It will be released publicly next month, which is really exciting. I would recommend everyone to give us a like or follow on Facebook and Instagram. We'll do a post when the report is launched. But also we are launching next month a new website called Youth Voice NT, which is essentially a one-stop shop for young people in the youth sector to access information and resources here in the Territory. And as part of that, we want to contribute to that work of promoting the strong achievements and talents of young people in the Territory. So the website will have a function for young people to submit their stories and creative work or any kind of content that they would like shared, or their voices. And then it will also include a youth gallery. So it'll provide that content that young people have submitted and a platform for young people to share their voices. It'll also include a information clearinghouse, which is essentially just a fancy word for a library or a database. And basically that is a warehouse for previous consultations, reports, research, strategies, any real documentation that is relevant to young people in the youth sector here. Some of the resources on there that we've collated so far have a national and an international focus. So for those of you who are in other jurisdictions, it might be worthwhile checking out to see if there's anything of interest to you, or in the same way we can upload your resources if you would like those to be accessible to young people in the youth sector. So yeah, definitely give us a follow or a like and keep an eye out for those exciting things that will be launched. I guess in summary, I didn't want to go into too much detail about the outcomes of the report because it will be made available online, but I did just want to share one of the asks from young people, which really is around youth voice and youth engagement. And that was that as young people, we want to be recognised as leaders, advocates and change agents in our community. And we want to be included as equal participants in decision making, and that's decision making relating to the development, implementation and evaluation of government policies, strategies and initiatives. So the whole process. And we really, you know, as young people, we want to be recognised for the diverse expertise that we bring across multiple policy areas. So, you know, when we're young people, we're employers, we're employees, we're carers, we're members of our society, and we contribute to society in a different way. And our expertise in those areas really should be valued in government decision making. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. I said, like, I thought that was an interesting project when I first heard about it. I had no idea that it's actually so in depth. And I love that you said that you were building on the existing consultations, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that report. We're also at NAPCAN very interested in that sort of idea of how children and young people are portrayed, and how we frame all sorts of things. So there's a bit of research that we're aware of about how we frame adolescence. So that's really interesting. And yeah, as I said to Ashleigh, I'm sure there's lots of people online who'll be really keen to kind of support your work and do that. So yeah, we'll share the links to your Instagram and Facebook as well. So that's great. I'll yeah, thank you for joining, but I'll let you have a little break. And yeah, it was really great. Thank you so much. Now I'll ask our third case study. I'll ask Beck and Jenny to take off to really, what do you call it? put their cameras on and their audio on, and maybe take over from me. I don't know if anyone saw, I was shooing my own young person away just before, which is sort of I'm not really in the spirit of the webinar. But anyway, so this is another project that we really loved as soon as we heard about it. And in line with the great work that Mission Australia does generally and Communities for Children, many of you will know, it's no surprise that this work is, like the other projects, totally the sort of real deal in terms of raising the voices of children, not just listening to children, but also acting on what children are saying and making them part of the process. It's a very big project to try and summarise in 10 to 15 minutes. So I'll hand over to Jenny and Pick. We have Jenny Chaves, who's the Area Manager for Strengthening Communities, South East Queensland at Mission Australia, and Beck Pick, who's the Community Development and Collective Impact Facilitator at Communities for Children, Inala to Ipswich, and the project lead for the Children's Voice Advisory Council. So over to you, Jenny and Beck.
Thanks so much, Helen. Really lovely to be here with everyone. And I'm also sitting and working and living on Yagara land. And I acknowledge our First Nations people listening in and the virtual audience, but also our First Nations young people, because our young people are our future leaders. So it's really exciting to be here. And look, it's so wonderful that Beck and I are segue, hey Beck, and children's particularly voice on how we ensure that we intervene at the early forms so that we can have better outcomes for our communities. And one really strong aspect of that is about how we create collective impact. And we do that by working together with communities. So in this region, we but our work is very much how can we work at a regional level to get the voice of community and in particular the voice of children. What I'm going to do is share my screen and hope, because we're not that compatible in Mission, believe it or not, we are with Zoom, and so we're hoping that it all works well. So guys, just bear with us as we do this, and we will definitely share with you. Hopefully it all works out for us. So I'll just get that happening. So I'll just get on to, I think, Beck,
yep.
Is that
Jenny,
working?
just maybe start working.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at my show. Okay, there we go. Yep. And that's working. Beck, sorry guys, I'm checking because we were all needing to check. There are some little videos in this as well. So guys, this is about, at this stage, a 2.5-year period. It in fact has based on how we build stronger communities through a framework that Mission Australia developed. And those areas are connected communities, inclusive communities, healthy communities, resilient communities, and thriving communities. And that is about ensuring that we actually can identify what those domains are that are critical and important for us in community life and for our children and families. And that has now been the framework we've embraced for this project and used as a platform. The project itself is around 4 stages of listening authentically to children's voice, but not just listening. This is about involving, encouraging participation and encouraging decision-making with children and getting them to tell us, co-design-wise, what they need and what they want. So really critical stuff. So this has been a bit of a long time. There's the BC, before COVID, which we've all been a part of. In 2019, the stage 1 was around listening to children's voices. Stage 2 was in 2020, and stage 3 in 2020, which was a project launch. And now we're into development of our advisory councils, which Beck and I have just finished running in Ipswich and the Brisbane region. So it's an exciting time for us, and we're happy to share with you what's happened. The first stage in 2019, and it went into 2020 just before COVID, was the development of voice labs through using, and some of you may know the group, a Polyglot Theatre, before COVID, because we actually got them to come up to Queensland for the first time in Queensland to run what are called voice labs. And you can see it on the screen. It's an amazing dome that speaks to the child as they walk in, and they are asked a range of questions, but they're really safe, they're comfortable. It's that kind of space that you want to crawl into, relax, enjoy. We crawled in and we really enjoyed it, I can tell you. We had over 200 children sharing their voices with us. That incorporated over 10 schools, 3 different fairly large community localities and community centres. And we then create from that outcomes video and reflection for each locality, and transcripts that were then fed back to every community that participated and to those children and their schools. What I wanted to really do with you really is not me talking, but for us to share a very minimal snapshot, because of time, from those 200 children about those critical areas of what makes a strong community for them. And so I'm actually going to play you a little video which tells us a bit of a story of what children think.
Welcome to Voice Lab. Today, Voice Lab and Mission Australia would like to hear from you about how your community can be the best it can be for children and young people. Before we begin, how old are you?
7, 13, 8, 5, 11.
Do you speak any languages other than English?
Yes, I speak a little Laos/Thai, Aboriginal, French. Yes, I can very well speak Hindi.
Next, we are going to ask you about your community. What suburb do you live in?
Ipswich, Leichhardt, Redbank Plains, Riverview, Inala, Carroll Park, Goodna, Ripley Valley, Acacia Ridge.
What does community mean to you?
It means love, family and friendship. It's a place that makes me feel safe and makes me feel comfortable. I think community means, to me, a group of people not just living with each other but understanding each other, knowing when to help each other, and that we can all be a community if we try. It means my land, where I'm from, my home, my surroundings.
What are the things that can help people feel like they belong in a community?
Always welcome them with open arms and always be kind to everyone who joins. By maybe holding this type of getting to meet you program at some destination. You can just come knock on their door and sit down, have a cup of tea with them. Good friends, good family, good services.
What do you think it means to be healthy?
To be active, to have healthy relationships with other people. I think to eat healthy food like fruit and veggies and have a lot of exercise. I think it means that you're proud of yourself.
What is the best thing about being you?
That I'm not like anyone else, I'm my own person. That I have heaps of people to support me. I always try my best and I never give up even if it's hard.
Today is about listening to children's voices. What is the best thing adults can learn from children?
That we need to be heard as well. It's not just them doing all the change, that children can help the world change as well. Imagination. That if adults show respect to other people, maybe the kids will do as well. Children have feelings they could learn how to be kind to others and to ask people how's the day so they could feel loved, appreciated and belong.
If you were in charge and you wanted to create the best community for children and young people, what would you do?
I would probably make a child president. I would walk the talk, then it's possible.
I'd make my community a place for children to be able to be safe.
Well, first I would ask children and young people what they would want in a community to make it better, and I would try to change it to suit them.
So I'm just coming back because we are running out of time, but it's so inspiring to listen to children. And when I was hearing Ashleigh and Aisha talking about the young people they're working with and who share their voices, you know, guys, there are younger children in that primary age who really do have a very clear view of what we need to be doing to hear them and what ideas they have that could make decisions around policy and the ways we operate as service providers, but also in government, be it local, state or federal. The second phase we continued on with those same schools because it is about continuity in a region. And we had over 221 children participate in having their say through art. And that was because children aren't always going to be, you know, verbally articulate. And there are other ways to do things. So this was around being creative. And so we again, and we're just showing you a little sample, and it was amazing. The way we did this was then back onto online galleries. Schools used it as their social media, in their newsletters. It's a really positive, enlightening, empowering process for children to see their work displayed and to also be able to talk about what it meant for them. So they're just some little snippets of the 221. So we've just only given you a few, but they are pretty amazing. And these are quite young children, some of these, and some were much, you know, in the older age as well. But they all focused on those key domains that we spoke about before. And then the next section that we did, and this was at the end of last year, with COVID hitting us, we were unable to do major face-to-face work. So we had to run 2 live stream events, one in the Ipswich region, which was called Ipswich Children's Voices, and we collaborated with the Ipswich Council, a really good process to work with local government, members of politicians and leaders in communities. And what we did was we created a Q&A process that children who are pictured here were able to develop their own questions to ask leaders in each community, in each side of this region. So we held one in the Ipswich region, and we had over 177, close to 200 participants face-to-face, but also virtually. And then we had a conversations with kids, which was done in the Brisbane region. And that was over 300 people virtually and face-to-face. And children, again, being physically able to sit in our space, but then a whole bunch of kids who pre-recorded their questions to the panel. Again, we have links that you can go to watch those processes, which we'll be happy to share as well. And I'm going to just share a little snippet of one of our children who'd like to share with you his thoughts.
I came to Mission Australia to express my speech to the community, so hopefully it'll help everyone in the future to work together to make a better life for everyone and to listen to the kids' voices that in the country. So I think that this children's voicing project will actually really help other kids get listened to and help in the future for kids to be listened to and for adults to work together to actually build a better community with their families and with the world. I felt really like happy and inspired by getting to express what I had to say to the panel and getting to hear all their answers of what they had to say to me. I hope that the community will listen to what the Mission Australia has to say and work together in the future so that Earth, Australia, and everything will live on and work together for a better world. My question was about how we could work together to stop COVID from just stopping us from linking together and actually socially talking to each other.
And so, guys, Theodore, and that's his name, Theodore, was a wonderful panellist for us and was really keen to let us know what's important for him and for his community. And so as we go forward, the next steps that we took was developing actual decision-making councils for children. And I'm going to hand over to Beck to give you that rundown, which is on screen now. Thank you, Beck.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. Jenny said this is the stage 4 of our project, and it's the final stage, but it's our ongoing stage. And so what we really wanted to do was find a way that we could have genuine and sustained engagement with children in our area. We wanted to build on what we'd already done, but be able to do it in a way that we could continue to do it for the longer term. And we wanted to really hear from children, again, what's important to them, and check in with children on what our assumptions were and with the work that we're doing in the area. So we came up with the idea of forming the Children's Advisory Councils. And again, as Jenny said, we work across 2 local government areas. So we've developed one in Ipswich and we've developed one in Southwest Brisbane area. The snapshot there goes through a lot of those details. So we invited 6 schools in each area to be part of the council. And those schools, again, were ones that we've worked closely with and that we do place-based collective impact work with in those areas as well. Children are grade 5 and 6. We're really wanting to add in there a bit of a mentoring element, so that the children, you know, they've gone through for grade 5, and then when they start in grade 6, they can help mentor the new children coming through the council in grade 5. And we've met just yesterday, actually, was our Southwest Brisbane meeting. So, and we did our first Ipswich one couple of weeks before that. So it is very about, and it was really wonderful to be able to have the children come together for their inaugural meetings before the year finished, and we'll be looking forward to the reconvening early next year. And I'll just quickly, Jen, on the next slide, we'll go through just a couple of kind of key parts of the model. So we developed the model really based on these guiding principles that I've got written there. And we want it to really flesh out around how children's input would be used. So we really wanted to make sure that the experience was positive and empowering for children. We wanted it to be really clear that children know that we value their voice and that we will ensure that their insights and ideas are listened to by us and by others. And what we really wanted also was to make sure that our work that we do in the Communities for Children program and beyond is really informed by what children in our local area are saying is important to them. So they're all the sort of key elements that we're incorporating within the model and really basing a lot of our discussions and our the work that the council will be doing with the children. And we're also looking at opportunities that we can develop, I guess, for the Children's Council to be able to connect with decision makers and with leaders in the area. And even at our very first meetings, we really discussed with the students, with the children, you know, who are the leaders that are local, and who do they know are the decision makers in our communities. A lot of people said Jeanette Young, so I think there must be a lot of TV news watching at the moment, but it was really great just to kind of get their insights into, from their perspective, you know, who do they see are the people that are locally or more broadly making decisions. So those slides are fairly self-explanatory. Again, because it's you know, we've just had our inaugural meetings and we really wanted to have a co-design element with the children. A lot of that input, how that input will be used, will be keep continually revisiting it. There are a few key areas there, such as the collective action groups, being part of the Communities for Children Committee, internal Mission Australia areas that we're firmly committed to, and then we'll be looking with children and thinking about ourselves around how we can evolve over a period of time to ensure that those children's voices are heard more broadly and listened to. The next slides are just really a bit of a snapshot photos of the two sessions. So you can see there that it was a really sort of hands-on engaging meetings for both the Ipswich and the Southwest Brisbane one. We've got, we talked, as I said, we talked about with children about opportunities that we can share information with decision makers and leaders, but we also talked to the children around, well, what are the opportunities that they have to be able to share some of these discussions within their own communities and their school community, and any other kind of areas that they connect with. We introduced the idea of children's rights and had this really great activity where we posted around the Children's Week resources on a few of the key children's rights. And we asked the children, well, what does this right mean to you, and why is this right important? And there were some really great responses from the children. They, have a lot of insight. There was a few themes coming out, but it was a really great way for them to just sort of think it through and gather their thoughts. We also talked about, well, what does community mean to you? The string activity down on the bottom left hand was really great. Everyone had an opportunity to share what community meant to them, and then all together you can see that it's a really interwoven community, is so interwoven and interconnected, and that was a really nice visual way to do that. We talked about things that make people feel that they belong in a community. I've just got a little quote. One of the children said, when everyone comes together, they can make good things. So there was just some really great responses from children, and they did that in a creative way. And then again, as part of that co-design element, we wanted to give the children an opportunity to think about what the group should be called. We doesn't necessarily have to be Children's Advisory Council. So we gave them that opportunity to have a bit of a think and a play, and there were some really good examples or ideas that they had, and they voted on their favourite ones. And our job now is to kind of take all of that information and see where we go to. We'll revisit it again next year with the group and see where that goes. And then that's the final picture, is really just the children themselves. So Ipswich on the left-hand side and Southwest Brisbane on the right-hand side. And it was just, a wonderful experience to be able to bring those children together and really be at the start of something that's going to be a wonderful thing moving forward. And that's it from me.
So much, Beck. That's really amazing. I loved all those pictures, and I love that I love that you're both smiling so much about the project as you talk about it. I could see Jenny when Theodore was speaking, it's a big smile, even though you've seen them lots of times. We're nearly out of time, so I was going to talk a little more about Children's Week, only just talk about a few ways that people can get involved in these things, but we'll send out the links to all these projects, and if people can support them, that's great. Children's Week next year, it's never too early to start planning, and Children's Rights Queensland here in Queensland is doing some really great stuff. And if you go to their website, which we'll share, there's we're really promoting the new book that we've created. So, but you can kind of find those things on the website. So I don't want to keep people after time. We do have, thanks to everyone, and thanks for coming, especially I know in New South Wales and Victoria, it's pretty late to be on a webinar on a Friday afternoon. We're going to finish with a little video from NAPCAN. It's a compilation of some of the artwork that we had during National Child Protection Week, and we'd asked children to draw what they want in community. So I was really reminded of that when I was looking at the beautiful artwork from Ipswich and Brisbane. And thanks so much. I feel like I want to bring everyone on and do a round of applause for those wonderful speakers, but I think I'll have to let everyone go about their evenings. And I'll just get my wonderful Ali to share the video and to finish off